Today, I want to talk about getting promoted and whether you are in a full time job right now or not, you're going to want to save this episode because those annual reviews or twice a year reviews that you do with your boss. I know a lot of people kind of roll their eyes and think it's a waste of time, etc. This is an opportunity for you to get promoted. And this is exactly what happened to Marco, who got promoted with a 37% increase in his total compensation. He got promoted from senior product designer to lead product designer at a large financial company. So let's dive into Marco's story so you can hear what he did, how he approached those annual reviews, and how joining Career Strategy Lab's UX Job Search Accelerator helped him. Okay. So, like I said, Marco was working as a senior product designer, and something really interesting happened to Marco. He said his colleagues had told him that he was operating at about 1 to 2 levels above his job title. And in some companies, job titles and salaries are associated with different levels. Maybe you've seen job descriptions that say Senior Product Designer 1, Senior Product Designer 2, etc. So that's what we mean with levels. And anyway, Marco said his colleagues has said to them essentially like, hey, Marco, what you're doing in your job, you're actually doing stuff that people 2 levels higher than you are doing. And so Marco kind of was a little frustrated, and he ended up deciding that he was going to look externally to get a new job because he felt like getting promoted internally wasn't even a possibility. So he started off on his job search, didn't get any traction, and joined Career Strategy Lab. And then something wild happened. He ended up going through the case study and portfolio part of Career Strategy Lab. And I'm just going to read verbatim what he wrote in our community. He said, the content I put together in the case study Google Docs was an insanely valuable tool and helped me successfully land a promotion with a 37% increase in my total compensation. I'm not even finished with everything in Career Strategy Lab, but I use the early exercises of writing out the case studies as a tool in my yearly review. That's how Marco did it. He wasn't even planning to stay at the company he was at. But once he joined Career Strategy Lab, he realized he could leverage what he was doing for his portfolio to use it in his performance review. And it worked. And so a couple of things I really want to point out here. Number one, what did Marco do in this lead up to the meeting with his boss, etc.? The first thing that Marco did was that he had a conversation with his manager before the annual review. And he said, and I'm just going to quote, he said, it started with a conversation with my manager before the annual review. I told them that I felt my leveling was wrong. Remember, we talked about the levels earlier. So I felt like my leveling was wrong. I was operating at a level above where I would like to be, and I wanted to be considered for a promotion. So Marco kind of set the stage for that performance review, was upfront with his boss. He knew he was planning to apply to jobs externally. So the act of alerting his boss that he felt like he was being compensated and with a job title lower than what he was doing, he just decided to go for it, and he just let his boss know. And then before the actual annual review meeting, Marco essentially started to gather the receipts, right? He was working on the case study for his portfolio, which he knew he could also use in the annual review. And he said this, again, I'm going to quote. He said, when the annual review season started in November, I used the UX case studies exercise from Career Strategy Lab to document evidence of my performance. The structure of how Sarah has it outlined was exactly the right method. The content in CSL was an insanely valuable tool that helped me successfully land a promotion with 37% increase in my total comp. And then during the actual annual review process, and for many of you who've been through this, sometimes you identify colleagues that you want to evaluate you, etc. And so Marco really leveraged this part where he got to choose which colleagues would vouch for him and fill out his performance review. And again, I'm going to quote, he said, during our reviews, we also do peer reviews. And I recommended people who I've worked with that would back up the statements I was making as further evidence, and it worked. So remember in the beginning how I told you that Marco's colleagues had said to him, hey, Marco, you're doing stuff that people like 1 and 2 levels above you are actually doing. He chose those people to be a part of his annual review process where they filled out, the forms that you often have to fill out. And so how did this all come together? Well, all of those 3 things worked together to help Marco get that 37% salary increase, right? What his colleagues said, along with Marco putting together those UX case studies that served as further receipts for the fact that he was operating 1 or 2 levels above his current title and salary, and telling this to his boss in advance of the whole annual review. So his boss was already thinking about it and maybe had more time to reflect on this or ask other people what they thought about Marco, etc. And it totally worked, like Marco said. All right, the big lesson though that I want you to remember from this episode is that promotions don't just happen. Your boss just doesn't wake up on the month that performance reviews happen and just randomly decide that you're going to get a promotion, right? That's ridiculous. Promotions happen when you advocate for yourself, when you communicate your skills and experience and present compelling evidence to your boss. And yes, I know this is not something that comes naturally to most people. And the people that get promoted do these things. So if you want to be someone who gets promoted, you're going to have to do these things, right? You just can't sit back and hope and cross your fingers that your boss promotes you, because that's not how the world works. So you need to be always collecting the evidence and the receipts of what you do in your job, not just 3 weeks before performance reviews. And this is why it's so important to get into the habit every week, every month, every, June, taking time to reflect on what you've done, literally taking notes, gathering examples, whether that's documents, screenshots, quotes from colleagues, etc., so that when the time does come where you want to try and get promoted or go look for a job elsewhere, you have all of this at your fingertips. So you don't need to spend 3 months trying to gather and remember all of this stuff, right? And so I want to just remind you that Career Strategy Lab, sure, we call it a UX job search accelerator, but it definitely can help you get promoted, because the same things that you need to do to get hired work if you want to get promoted, right? It's no different. You need to clearly articulate what you do, the impact you've had, how you've added value to the team, to the company, etc. And you need to showcase that on your resume and in case studies, which can be tremendously helpful if you sit down in that interview with your boss and you're able to pull up a presentation to not just show, but also tell them what you've done over the last year or 6 months or something like that. So performance review season may not be happening right now. If it is, you're in luck. If it's not, this is your sign to get ready, to start getting into the habit of documenting what you've done, what you've worked on, so you don't need to rush when performance season does come up, and so that you are ready if there is ever a discussion internally that comes up, just unexpectedly about you getting promoted, or if unexpected opportunities at other companies come into your inbox. All right, friend, that's it for today. I hope this episode leaves you feeling more confident and clear about what you need to do now or in the future to get promoted. Do not wait until a couple of weeks or days before your performance review season to get ready. Now is the time to get ready because your story might be similar to what happened to Marco if you take the time to prepare now. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you in another episode.